God of War. God difficulty. Pain. We're entering the Oracle Temple and then into the sewers. And this game is amazing. And every time I take some time away from this project, because I keep forgetting to commentate it, I come back and I'm reminded of just how much I love this game. And it's funny, isn't it? Because you might get me quite pissed off at this game in some of the early videos, because it pisses me off a lot. But it's still amazing, it's like a marriage, isn't it? It's like a superb marriage where I know it's great and I know she loves me, but she also fucking hates me sometimes. And we're of course taking on some Gorgons here with a couple of the Harpies. And this game is just mechanics forward in spite of everything else being so damn forward in the mix as well. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to come back to this project, and I haven't even shared it, having recorded it months ago. Because it just does exactly what it set out to do, you know? They wanted to have this huge Greek spectacle with this, you know, I would like to think it's Eastern-inspired combat, but it's really a Western take on those Eastern design principles, and it's all shoehorned into this wonderful Greek mythology and just this tour de force of technology and aesthetic and intention. And it is interesting, isn't it? Because when you go to the other God of Wars and you come back to 1, Kratos does move a little slow and he doesn't quite have some of the quality of life changes he gets later on with movement and certain options, but he still is very much in your control and extremely capable. The sequence here involves moving these statues to block holes. If you don't do this, the Harpies will infinitely respawn. And I'm not crazy enough to try killing them to see if there is a limit, because this is the PS2, and back in the PS2 games weren't afraid to kick your ass and smash your teeth in, and then ask you for money afterwards while you were spitting out that fractured jawbone you've got left. So be very careful here, and the game is phenomenally designed in several ways. So every time the Harpies go to do any kind of attack, even off screen, they will scream. And of course, you know, screen space is really, really useful at telling you what enemies are going to do, and if you keep them off the screen, it tends to pacify them to some extent. But if you hear that scream, if you hold block, you will be golden. And then it's just going to be a case of square triangle into Orion's harpoon to finish them. You can do some jumping grabs if you want to get fancy or do something a little different. You know, you could do some ascensions if you want to mix it up. And I was thinking about something the other day, which is very true in the God of War pantheon, specifically the older ones. The newer ones, I can't really speak of them too much, but it's the idea of a very good Ninja Gaiden player said that challenge running Ninja Gaiden gets a little boring because you can make that game very difficult by limiting a lot of things, but all that ends up happening is you go to the very capable specific things that you have left. So if you get rid of 8 options, the last 2 you will overuse, and it will become use those 2 options ad infinitum. And it makes me think of God of War. And I like the options in a pain run. I like the stripped down moveset of Kratos. It's objectively not as interesting as his moveset when he has upgrades and he has all the different weapons and the different moves and the different juggles and all the things you can string together with the tools. But I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy propping enemies up and repeatedly bouncing them and grabbing them and, you know, doing plumes of Prometheuses and Valors and Spirits and whatnot. Like, I really appreciate the minimalist and Spartan toolset of Kratos. And I don't know if I'd feel the same in Ninja Gaiden, because I've never played it like that. It's definitely something I have to explore, and I'm going to do that once the emulator gets a bit better. But just this idea of Ninja Gaiden's super challenge runs, like when you really limit things, just become using the strongest move repeatedly. And that's pretty much what God of War is when you restrict it enough. And I don't know what the hardest run is. I would imagine that there is an argument there between subjective and objective, purely based off around the idea that single segment will always be more difficult than segmented, but there's always those lunatics out there that don't get nervous and don't get adrenaline and don't get those like crazy moments of just anxiety or whatever it is that happens to get you with the performance that makes doing single segments so punishing. And, you know, it takes all kinds, doesn't it, to do that kind of thing. But as far as a segmented run goes, where you can get a bit more creative on segmented runs and you can get more obtuse and ridiculous, because you can do things that you simply can't. You cannot play the same in a single segment run as you do in a segmented run, unless your playstyle is incredibly safe and effective. So then it asks you the question of what do you reduce and what do you restrict? Because there comes a point, doesn't there, where you take away enough, what is left? So we look at the pain as the template. What can we do to make this worse? Well, I suppose you could say no rolling, which people have done. And that does make it difficult because then you're going to be overly reliant on movement and blocking. I suppose then you could say take away blocking and rolling. Then you're entirely reliant on movement and high-profile, low-profile techniques, and that becomes incredibly troublesome, especially to certain enemies. And then where do you go from there? So I suppose if you really wanted to be miserable, you could do no blocking, no rolling, no grabbing, pain. And then you're in a world of hurt where, like, a person such as myself goes, why the fuck would you want to do that? But somebody out there who loves the series, who's looking for that next level of insanity, is going, I don't know, maybe I do want that. You know, why did you climb the mountain? Because it was there. Why did you do this ridiculous run? Because I could. Or I didn't know if I could at the time. You know? And then where do you go from there? Do you limit using heavy attacks, no triangles? Like, can you only do squares? Can you never do enders? Like, where do we take it? I mean, you can take it to some really pretty miserable places if you drive it enough. Speaking of a miserable place, Cyclopses in God of War 1, where you just chip the shit out of them with the plume impacts from whichever movie you want to use. And I'm not going to tell you there's anything fancy to this because you've seen me do it already and you've seen me lament the fact I really don't like it. The only thing to bear in mind is every so often when you get the prompt on these creatures, not only can the prompt detection be a pain in the ass and you'll miss it and get hit, but additionally when they recover afterwards, they go into a somewhat enraged mode and get this berserk property where they want to come and meet you and say hello, and you don't know what they're going to do. They're either going to run up to you and do like a scream and then that resets them, or they're going to run up to you and do a very swift attack. And the more you play here, the more you'll be able to read what's going on and get away from it. But this is the area where this enemy will get dangerous because they go into a certain tendency to hyper-aggression, and he's coming now, potentially, unless he... No, we got him out of it. Okay, that's good. But I was tempted to speed some of this up, but because I haven't got this on the channel, I wanted to keep it. And my rule, usually, when it comes to covering games, is if I don't have a project there, I will cover it in more depth. If I do, I will trim it down and I will cut out all the inessential moments because there's no reason to really sit and watch me do something for a prolonged period of time when there's no challenge or anything for me to add. And it all depends on how complex the game is. And of course, I do think God of War is very complex, especially if you know about the speedrunning tricks and if you know about some of the other features that happen. A lot of the tech that you can learn. It is a surprisingly robust game with some depth to it, in spite of it looking quite simplistic and having a reputation for being kind of the baby mode action game, which I've always kind of resented. But this is a game where you can make it as hard as you want to make it, and I think that there's a lot to be said about that. Because, you know, we're coming up on 20 years old, and it's still a game that you can go back to and have a great time with and go back to and do something new with, because there's just so much that you can do if you're interested in engaging with it. And I still haven't played Ragnarok yet. I'm curious as to what that experience will be like. I don't think I'm going to like it. But it's okay, you know, those God of War games aren't for me. They're not made for me. I was there at the start. I like this Kratos. The new one, I love love Stargate, but not so fond of turning Kratos into Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 4. Oh, by the way, here, camera can be really important again, but you want to be careful because as soon as they get on screen, they're going to do some shenanigans, and the jawbone that they're wielding, this mandible has a surprisingly large amount of range. It's definitely one of the more roll-catchy moves in this game, and there's a few things you can do here to reset this if you want to. I'm not going to be going into that type of stuff, purely based off the fact that I want to fight these as best as I can without being a giant bitch, and I am a giant bitch because this game is hard, but I try my best not to be too much of a bitch. And that's not to say that if you are a bitch and you do the bitch strats that you're a bitch, because I personally think that in a game that's this limited and this difficult, you should do what you can to survive. You know, this is not like Vanilla Sagat in Street Fighter 4. You're not just using a cheesy character that gets one anti-air into a win. You know, you have to earn this, and however you do it, more power to you. And you can tell it's a difficult game because I'm not even going to have the complete run on it, because I'm not doing the clones. I don't think I'll ever do the clones. It's not my wheelhouse. But there are channels out there that are very good at it, which is really, really good. And the channel I mention a lot, by Zim, is currently covering God of War 2 now in a Redux run, which is really, really cool. You should totally check that guy out. He might be in the comments, and if he is, please check him out. I'd also like to say, for future reference, just in case there's any, you know, decade-late shit-talking, that when I say a channel is good on my channel, guys, and when I give people credit, I do it because they deserve it. I do it because it's reality, it's true, and it's how I feel. I don't do it from the perspective of wanting to blow smoke up their ass or kiss along their chest as we lay in the sunlight waiting to make further love. It's not about that. You know, credit where it's due. I have a lot of respect for players that do amazing things with games that I love, because I know how hard it is to do the things they're doing, and some of the things they're doing I cannot do. That is why I give credit, and I will always do that. It never comes from a perspective of kissing ass, it never comes from a perspective of thinking that you're a god or thinking that you're like the best person in the world. You know, I don't think that. I give you the props you deserve because you've done something that I think is amazing, and I wish more people knew about it. Sadly, not everybody out there who's good at games has the same level of humility as some people, and they can be a douchebag about it. This is no shade at Zim. Zim seems like a pretty cool guy. I don't know the man, but I know what he's done in this game, and hopefully so will you. But some people out there like to talk shit, and fuck those people. But this is God of War, and this game is amazing, and every time I come back to this session, the music, the visuals, the mechanics, just the connection to the game. And something else as well, I'm playing this on emulation, as you know guys. I was playing it on, is it RPCSCTPTXTV? You know the one, the old one. Don't play it on that one, guys. I was kind of safe in my ways because that one has all my settings and it's not gone wrong, and I'm terrified to change things because sometimes they don't work anymore. Absolutely do not use that one. It has a ton of input delay. It was a masterpiece machine for the longest time, but we have a better way now. And the emulator that I'm using now, which I wish I'd recorded this on, is called DuckStation. And it's not new, I'm just late. And the input delay and the ability to add like high definition textures and things is really, really cool. So if you're going to be playing any of these older games and you want to get the best version of them, try to get the most updated emulator that works well for you, because the difference in input delay is night and day. I can't even begin to tell you guys. You know, like it's not unplayable by any means. It's not as good as native. It's nowhere near as good as it is if you play on hardware. But there's noticeable delay, and sometimes you don't get what you want, which is frustrating. So being able to do that and do it on a system where you don't get that is great. And I tried DuckStation when I was playing Genji at the Dawn of the Samurai game, which is absolutely phenomenal. I recommend that game as well. Incredibly cool game with one of the tightest parries I've felt in a while. But if you play it there, you will have a much more satisfying time and just feel like a true God of War. And this area here is a kind of room that would be a lot easier on that version, just purely based off of your connection to the game and the responsiveness, because this is a really hard room. I haven't spoken about it too much, but it's a long checkpoint involving archers, and when you mess it up, you have to do a ton again. And it's not like any of the parts themselves are all that bad. Minotaur, grunts, or whichever version this is, you know, with legionnaires and archers and things, they're not the hardest guys in the game. But if you do it all in one stretch, that's when it starts to become a bit more difficult. And it's also the additional spawns with the archers. Keeping them off the screen is useful to stop them from shooting you, but every so often these guys they'll try to test their boundary and be arseholes about it, and because their projectile has got some cool properties that makes it a little frustrating at times, you've got to be real careful. And just be careful in general, because these enemies aren't messing around, and if you get hit by archers at the end of everything we've just done, it's the most underwhelming feeling in the world. Nobody wants to lose to archers with explosive bolts. Oh, wow, that was close. But if you can grab one, you can then lasso him into his friend, and of course collision will do the rest. That is the end of the video, guys. Thank you for watching, and you take care now.